Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and wronged women. We are the Uncredited Women of Science, and welcome back to the Wronged Woman Heroes in Science podcast. We barely know what those enormous balls of light we see when we look at the night sky, the stars, really are, but the little information we have didn't reach us with the UFOs, of course. Someone dedicated their life for this truth, and someone else buried that truth. I think, Eylül, we are going to talk about one of the biggest academic usurpations in history.
And what a usurpation, Beren. Today, we'll be talking about Cecilia Payne Gaposchkin. We can call her the Iron Lady of the astronomy world, but not metaphorically. I'm literally talking about the element iron, the one in the periodic table. At the time, everyone thought that the sun was made of iron, but a young woman came along and she said, "You're all wrong."
And she paid one heavy price for her courage, didn't she?
Absolutely.
Can't say I'm surprised. Today we will take a trip down memory lane about how a woman's genius was stolen by the Gentlemen's Club, from the cold corridors of Cambridge to the dusty archives of Harvard. If you're ready, let's go to the beginning of the 1900s, to a foggy London morning.
Take us back, Beren.
Cecilia Payne. She was born in England. So, how did her love for science begin? Does she just go Eureka one day?
Actually, it started when she was pretty young. One day she saw an orchid in the garden and felt the laws of the universe and its perfect geometry. But England at that time laughed at that young girl's dream of becoming a scientist. When Cecilia entered Cambridge in 1919, she wanted to study physics. However, physics classes were only for men. How sad.
Did she even get into those classes?
Well, she did, but the twist is, she entered like a ghost. I want you to imagine this. You enter the classroom, you sit in the front row, the professor comes in, looks at the class, but he doesn't look at you. He starts the lesson by saying, "Good morning, gentlemen." You're sitting there, alive and in flesh, but because the professor can't put woman and science together in a sentence, you don't actually exist. You're like an optical illusion.
What? Isn't this psychological torture?
Absolutely. Moreover, Cambridge refused to give her a diploma. It's the story we've seen before. It's how women are treated at that time.
But this is so absurd.
Yeah, it is. She passed all the exams, completed all the credits, but they said women can't be given diplomas. So, Cecilia understood in that moment. In this country, she could look at the sky, but they would never let her talk about the sky. Just like in some countries today.
So, what does she do?
She consults Arthur Eddington, who's a prominent British astrophysicist of her time. Eddington gave her the advice of a lifetime. "You'll waste your time here, Cecilia," he says. "Go to America. At least there, they see women as workforce."
And Cecilia arrives in America in 1923 at the Harvard Observatory. What awaited her there?
So, there are these Harvard calculators. Well, a professor named Edward Pickering, tired of his male assistants, started hiring women, saying, "Even my maid can do better calculations than these men."
That's so condescending.
I know, right? It is. I mean, these women spend 10 hours a day examining and classifying photographs of stars, but they were told, "Don't think, just work."
Don't think, just work? Are we sure these men's brains were functioning properly in the past?
Well, they were functioning, I guess, but how they were functioning, it's pretty debatable. However, Cecilia refused to be reduced to a working machine. She took the newly developing quantum mechanics and did something no one had ever done before. She read the light of the stars. She calculated the temperature of the atoms in that light, and the result was chilling.
What exactly did she find? Let's elaborate on that shocking truth for our listeners.
Well, until then, the scientific world argued stars are like the Earth. They contain iron, magnesium, and rock. They're just very hot. Cecilia, however, looked at her data and saw this. Stars are actually more than 90% hydrogen, and the rest is helium. So the universe isn't rock and earth as we thought, but a vast sea of hydrogen.
This is the biggest revolution in astronomy since the heliocentric system.
I agree, it is. But the woman who made this revolution was only 25 years old.
She was 25 years old?
Yeah, she was so young. And standing against that young, courageous woman was the most powerful man of the time, Henry Norris Russell. I mean, have you ever even heard of him?
No. Obviously no. Well. Now we come to the most painful part of the story. Cecilia sends her thesis to Russell. How does Russell reply?
Russell replies by writing her a letter. The statements in the original letter are so arrogant. He says, the results seem impossible. We know that the sun and the earth are made of the same elements. The fact that there is so much hydrogen is a measurement error. If you publish this, you'll be sidelined by the academic community.
He quite literally says, I'll destroy you.
Yeah, and Cecilia, in that loneliness, gives in. She adds the saddest scientific sentence in history to the revolutionary conclusion of her thesis. These high hydrogen ratios are probably not real. She puts a nothing here sign on the treasure she herself found.
Is this woman kidding? What about Russell? What does he do?
Well, the real injustice begins here, Beran. In 1929, Russell reaches the same conclusion through other means. He publishes a huge article called The Chemical Composition of Stars. In it, he states that the sun consists of high amounts of hydrogen. This discovery goes down in history as the Russell discovery worldwide, even though it wasn't his discovery.
What happens to Cecilia?
She continues to work for low wages in the basements of Harvard, and her name is only mentioned briefly in a footnote.
What the? This is called the Matilda effect in the history of science, isn't it?
Okay, what does that mean?
It's the crediting of women's achievements to their male colleagues.
Oh, it's what we see with Rosalind Franklin in our previous episode, and now with Cecilia.
Exactly.
Even when Cecilia received her professorship years later, the university gave her a different title, not the Professor of Astronomy, as she should have been, because at that time it was contrary to tradition for women to hold that title at Harvard.
After what you've said, I'm thinking Cecilia Payne didn't just discover the abundance of hydrogen, she also showed how fragile that rigid, insurmountable, male-dominated wall in scientific world really is, right?
Absolutely. Cecilia's tragedy wasn't just that her discovery was stolen. Her real tragedy was that she lived her whole life as someone who was expected to be wrong. She was treated like a ghost at Cambridge. She waited decades to get her professorship at Harvard. But do you know what she did? She never gave up. In her own words, she continued to hear the symphony of the stars.
As we conclude the program, I want to ask, how should we remember Cecilia today? Not just someone wronged by Russell, but as a woman.
Well, yeah, she was obviously much more than someone who was just wronged by Russell. Cecilia Payne is the woman who defined the identity of the universe. She laid the cornerstone of the vast field of science we call astrophysics today. She was a leader as a woman, and she was a very courageous, inspiring one. While Russell and the others thought the universe was a pile of rocks, Cecilia proved to us that the universe is a dynamic, radiant, and inexhaustible source of energy.
So, the immense emptiness we see when we look at the sky today was actually illuminated in Cecilia's genius.
Exactly. The scientific world paid its debt to her very late. Even when she was, ironically, awarded the Henry Norris Russell Award in 1976, she maintained her composure. But our aim in making this podcast today is to go beyond that composure. We're making a reminder to that gentleman's club that tried to silence Cecilia, that the truth, no matter what happens, will eventually come to light.
In this episode of Women's Heroes in Science, we accompanied the light of Cecilia Payne Gaposchkin. The shadows that fell upon our women's labor will enlighten it.
Remember, dear listeners, stars are made of hydrogen, and science is made of stubbornness and patience.
In the next episode, we will talk about a woman whose fair share in the Nobel Prize was given to her male colleagues. A woman who suffered throughout the years of war, Lise Meitner. Until then, stay curious and stay just.
And most importantly, never stop listening to the voice of the stars. Goodbye!